Well, first of all, thank you both so much for being here. I've just watched the film, and it's really incredible, and I think will really attract a lot of interest in the yoga community and beyond. So I think one of the things that is so interesting about Autobiography of a Yogi is that so many influential people have talked about the moment that they found this text and the huge influence it had on their lives. So people like Steve Jobs and George Harrison. I found my parents' copy and stole it when I was in college. So I would love to hear from both of you. When did you first find this text and start really delving into Yogananda's work?
Well, I mean, I could start. I say that my research for this started in 1984 when a boyfriend gave me the book. He said, "Lisa, you're too empirical. Read this book." And the book is full of miracles and fantastical things, and it exploded my rational mind. I didn't know what to make of it. Should I take this literally? Should I take this metaphorically? And it was a huge gift in that way. It helped me get more comfortable with not knowing and to understand that there are things possible that I just don't understand. And 20 years later, here I got invited by Paola to join her to make this film.
I was a newbie, so I had not read Yogananda when I started making this film. It was an intense diving into Yogananda's works, and I started with the Autobiography of a Yogi, and it wasn't so easy for me initially to read that book and to get into it. So for me, it took I think by the third read, the first read, I was like, okay, I'm gonna think about this now. And then we went to India. And then right before India and throughout India, I was reading the book again. And it took probably 3 or 4 times before everything started to click for me. And that was also while we were reading a lot of other Yogananda's works. I mean, he's so prolific. He wrote so much. So, his commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, Man's Eternal Quest, so many books of his. Man's Eternal Quest is a great one. Divine Romance. They all started to make a lot more sense, but I had to crack the autobiography. That was a hard one for me.
You should see our books. They're tabbed and so well worn, they're almost falling apart. I turn to it for reference all the time.
Yeah. And so why bring this story to film?
People, I would say tons of people had been trying to make this film for decades. And they would come to Self-Realization Fellowship and ask to make either a documentary film, feature film. There was even a request to make it into a TV series, because there's enough about his life to do an entire TV series. I think that the timing was right in 2008. There was, I think that somebody came with financing, and it was also a time where a lot of the direct disciples of Yogananda had been starting to pass away, and there was a sense of, we need to get this history down. We need to share it with the world. And we were very, very lucky to be approached to make the film by the organization.
But I also think these are challenging times. We're in a financial crisis, there's war around the globe, and people are trying to find a way to handle the difficulties in life, to find some internal peace and some stability, and that yoga, and the kind of yoga that Yogananda taught, and various kinds of yoga, can help us to stabilize and ground us. So I think it's really timely.
Well, at the Huffington Post, we're doing a lot of reporting on this explosion of mindfulness and interest in yoga and Eastern philosophy, and it's been something that's just really been, there's been so much growth in that area in the past few years especially. Can you tell us a little bit more about the role that Yogananda played in bringing yoga and in bringing Eastern spirituality to the West?
I mean, he's one of the fathers of yoga in America. He wasn't the first Swami to come. That was Swami Vivekananda in 1893. But Yogananda was the first Swami to come here. He came in 1920. Okay, first of all, imagine a brown-skinned man in an orange turban and orange robe coming to Protestant white America in 1920. When he landed in Boston, he spoke at the Congress of Religious Liberals, and his message took. The title of his first speech was The Science of Religion. So he was making that connection, right?
Yeah, I think if you think about the fact that, he was asked by his lineage, it was something that he was requested to do, to come and bring yoga to the West. It was not something that he really wanted to do. He wanted to sort of run away to the Himalayas and live in a cave and just get lost in God. And his guru kept saying to him, "You will go to America." And he's like, "I don't even speak English. What are you talking about?" But it really was something that he was asked to do this. And if you think about when he came right between the two big world wars of the 20th century. So as Lisa was just saying that now is a really good time, so was it then. And it was almost like there was an opening at that time for him to come. And not only that, but science at that time was just, there were big breakthroughs in science. Quantum physics was just, being proven. And, Einstein's theory of relativity at that point had already been tested. And it was something that people could wrap their brains around. These concepts of particle physics tie into sort of the concepts of the ancient rishis, the Vedic philosophy. So there are two ways in which I think that becomes really relevant. One is that we basically on a subatomic level, life is not what it seems, and that was something that people were like, wow, they could really relate to that. And the other is just on a molecular level. I think we're all connected, and that too is a concept that was suddenly people were open to because of what was happening in science at the time.
I think you could say he was the right man at the right time with the right message, and he's been called the first superstar guru in America. I mean, he was selling out 6,000-seat theaters in 1925 in LA, before even radio was really popular. So he lived here in America for 32 years. He was the first Swami to really live here for such an extended amount of time. So I think he's really one of the main reasons why we were able to open up to yoga in America.
Right, and as you mentioned, there's such a scientific sort of aspect to his message, and in the film, you mentioned that he's talking about neuroplasticity 50 years before this starts to be recognized by Western science. So how was it in the film that you really went about exploring the tension between science and spirituality, and also finding both these spiritual leaders and these great scientists to kind of bridge that gap and bring these two things that we traditionally separate together?
Well, I think starting with the fact that Yogananda's first speech in America was the science of religion. So science and spirituality, yoga is a scientific practice. So he would talk about yoga as it's science. In other words, these are steps that you can take. They're repeatable. You will have the same results. And you are like a scientist. You are your own scientist, and you're using your body as a laboratory. And it's very democratic. It's not, anybody can do it. And these repeated steps lead to the same results.
And I think yoga's been called a spiritual technology, which I love. It's a set of tools and practices and methods with which to go inside, to get quiet, to help quiet the mind and tune in. Yogananda used to talk about comparing it to a radio, tuning out the static and tuning in to the cosmic broadcast, if you will. But so we realized early on he had a scientific approach to it, and that science was a great way to connect with modern audiences. So we looked for neuroscientists, Andrew Newberg and Deepak Chopra, and we were trying to find that intersection.
And Anita Goel.
Oh, right.
And also, of course, the spiritual aspect is at the center of the film, and there's some really beautiful imagery that kind of illustrates the more ephemeral aspects of the work and of his life. I'm wondering how you dealt with sort of the challenge of representing very non-physical themes on the camera.
It was tough.
Yeah, I would say that it was a challenge. It took a while to come up with the cinematic language. First and foremost, so much of yoga, even the use of recreations in a film, is something that some people feel is taboo, and it was hard to imagine that we could actually capture with recreations parts or aspects of Yogananda's life that dealt with that yearning, with that otherworldliness. And I think that initially we thought of using visual effects to try to create some of these other states, higher states of consciousness, and it really didn't work. It just got worse and worse. The more we tried, the worse it was. And we started, out of necessity, we just started filming things like reflections on water, or mirrors. We would do time lapses. We just started to use our intuition, follow our intuition, to create aspects of that consciousness that we wanted to portray and layer it and play around with it in editing. And it created for us something magical in ways that we didn't expect. And then we just said, well, let's forget about the digital effects for now. This is sort of the language that we want to use.
I mean, we wanted the film to be experiential. We wanted to take people on a journey. I mean, on his life journey, but also on their own personal journey, right? And so film is a really visceral medium. So it wasn't so much about being literal, which is where we started to try and represent those cosmic consciousness experiences, right? But it was sort of to create a mood and to kind of create uplift so that by the end of the film, hopefully you're walking out feeling, yes, there is possibility here. I can tap into infinite possibility.
And also, I think that everyday life is poetic. And we wanted to capture that. We wanted to find the poetic moments in everyday life. And that's part of the awakening that happens also as a meditator, a practitioner of yoga, is that as the defenses that we put up and the distractions of our daily life start to subside, we notice them more. And that was something we wanted to portray.
Well, and I'd be curious about how your own yoga and meditation practices, if you had them before you started the film, have changed over the course of this almost 6-year exploration of Yogananda's life.
You know, we both look at each other. It's really personal to talk about, is what I'm finding. I felt like, how can I say it? In my life, I've been a periodically super disciplined yogi where I'm practicing 2 hours a day doing hatha yoga, mantra, meditation, and other times I'm not getting to my practice. Sometimes I've gone on spiritual sabbatical, meaning I'm not doing a daily practice, still trying to live a spiritual life. But so I felt like the universe and Yogananda was saying, you need to re-immerse yourself. Come over here, work on this film. And so I can't say that I'm practicing every day, but it's steeped me so much more in the concepts. My whole life now is an immersion in yoga. So I would say that the other thing is, and we both have stories about this, is I've had a lot of knee-jerk responses to the God word in my life, and for Yogananda, that was how he defined the divine, the sacred, the infinite, the universe, was God. And it has really helped me wrestle with that and to understand the much wider possibility of what that word can represent, which feels really personal.
I think for me it was just a complete transformation. I think I went into this with some trepidation, and like Lisa, I had problems with the word, God, and yet I was a seeker. I was seeking, I was trying to figure out, I was very interested in figuring out what the meaning of life was. I was philosophical. I did a lot of reading to try to find those answers, but experientially, I think the idea of, this movie has just totally changed the way I see the world, the way I live. And I think that the reservations and obstacles to getting there I really relate to them. So they became a part of making the movie. The resistance, the questioning, the empirical mind kicking in, not wanting to believe things, going to India and having things completely shooken up. My entire body was just going through things that I'd never experienced before, and letting go of the mind, letting go of the thinking, letting go of the part of you that needs everything to be exactly so and just right. And I think letting go of the empirical mind and tapping into the intuition and surrender. What a hard thing for us to do as human beings. That was the biggest gift, and Yogananda totally paved the way.
And so you must have been filming in India for a good portion of this, 5.5 years that you were working on the film. Where were you going to retrace Yogananda's footsteps?
We spent 3 or 4 weeks in India, right? So we were in his birthplace. 5 weeks in Calcutta. I had to leave a week early to come home and teach. Yeah, so I never made it to Babaji's cave up in the Himalayas. Calcutta, Varanasi,
Ranchi, which is where he had his first school. And then from Varanasi, then we went up to Delhi and made our way up into the Himalayas. And there is a beautiful ashram of Yoganandas up in Dwarahat. And then there's the mountains up there. There's a very special cave that the lineage starts with Babaji. And Babaji is a timeless saint and very well known in India. And he actually was the one who gave the teaching of Kriya Yoga, which is what Yogananda brought to the West, to Lahiri Mahashai. And what's really special about the lineage and how it comes down and how these teachings came to the West is that these were teachings that only ascetics did. You know, the people that were living in caves and, just completely devoting themselves to God, they were not living in the world like us. And it was Babaji who really made that Lahiri Mahashai's mission in the lineage. So he, in the 1850s, brought the teachings down for people like you and me to practice in our daily lives. And it was revolutionary. And so that's what had to happen was Yogananda, then came, Sri Yukteswar, Yogananda's teacher, and then Yogananda. So he was meant to be the one to bring it to the world, to bring it to the West and to bring it to the world. And I think that the idea of being able to practice these teachings in our daily lives with technology speeding up, with our lives being so chaotic, is the point. In other words, bliss is not somewhere out there, like for somebody to someday show you. It's right here, right now. And we can have it. And
You just have to tune in.
You got to tune in.
I think there's such a powerful moment in the film when he's talking about how living a truly godly life in the jungle of civilization is that's the real spiritual practice. I think that's such a powerful message from Yogananda. But I'm curious, looking at all of the people you spoke to and in the interviews you watched and the research you've done, what are some of the few core things that people say really affected them most about Yogananda's work and about the autobiography?
Wow, great question. I mean, one of the things that blew me away is that people told us repeatedly that Yogananda appears to them. They've seen him. Many people told us that they'd be in a bookstore and literally a book would practically pop off the shelf and bop them on the head. Rappers told us that. Writers. It's pretty amazing.
At first we thought people were making it up, and then it was like, people really were telling this story over and over again.
Well, no, that's okay. I just, the biggest takeaway for me is just go within, make time to get quiet, go within. As Paola said, that peace and quiet, equanimity, it's all available anytime, any moment to anyone.
I think that he himself, we underestimate just the power of seeing darshan being given, which is just that power of the energy that's coming off the screen of Yogananda. I mean, we had the great fortune of being able to go into the archives of Self-Realization Fellowship, and I mean, there was footage there from the 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s. I mean, it just was amazing. So,
I mean, we found footage that SRF didn't even know they had, actually.
Yeah, I mean, there was footage from his Mahasamadhi when he left his body that, was footage that nobody had even seen before. But I think the power of that imagery in the film, when he looks at you, is something really tangible is happening there. And you got to actually see the movie to feel it, so come on out and watch. But I think that that's one thing that really captivates people is actually him on screen. I think also he had a very compelling story. I mean, fish out of water, against all odds, amazing story. But the thing that surprised us was that it was very difficult to tell a story of a saint. How do you make that? How do people relate to that? Where's the drama? Where's the hardship? Where's the bad quality or the misbehavior that you're following? And what kind of transformation does he make? And what we forget is that being human is so dramatic. And, we all encounter what his humanity really came through. I mean, we brought out parts of his story that were not in the autobiography, and, his encounters with racism and, the heartbreak, loss, financial loss, having to rebuild his organization from scratch after, a betrayal. I mean, all sorts of things, drama that we all go through. And so he became relatable to people. And that's, I think, one of the things that's really great to hear as filmmakers is when people say they're relating to this guy, even though he's a saint.
You asked about moments. One of my favorite moments in the film is George Harrison, who loved Yogananda, and in the sequence about neuroplasticity and finding out that yoga is all about how we can regroove our brains, right? And so George Harrison says, I keep stacks of the autobiography of a yogi, and I give them out whenever someone needs regrooving. I say, "Hey, read this," and that's pretty relatable.
And I think also it's so amazing that Steve Jobs gave away copies of this book at his funeral, and speaks so much to the influence that it's had over his life.
I mean, it was said that Autobiography of a Yogi was the only book on Steve's iPad at the end.
Yeah, the Think Different advert that they used, I think, came from his tapping into his intuition through meditation. So that was the genius of what he was able to encounter or find through meditation was what he attributes to his success.
And so I imagine this film is going to sort of attract a big audience within the yoga community, but are you also what responses are you seeing from people who have seen the film that are really not familiar with these kind of themes and with Yogananda's life and work?
I mean, big time. I mean, as Paola said, we're all seeking, even when people think we're seeking fame, ambition, fortune, we're seeking wholeness is what we're really seeking, and fulfillment and wholeness, and a connection to the universe, right? However you define that. And so people are coming up to us and saying, I had no idea, or people are saying, I practiced Hatha yoga for 20 years. I didn't even know it was connected to meditation. And in the great traditions of yoga, Hatha yoga, which I also practice, is preparation for meditation.
I think people that are interested in history, people that are interested in sort of against all odds stories, I feel like the non-dogmatic approach of yoga makes it very open to any practitioner. So it's not an exclusive practice. You can be coming from practice any religion and still experiment with getting deeper and closer to your own wholeness, as Lisa says, your own sense of spirit. So it doesn't tell you that how you have to be or who your God needs to be. And I think that's what people are attracted to.
A lot of people have come up to us and said, my God, I have to read that book.
And so we'll turn to questions from the audience, if anyone would like to.
Hi, thank you for coming and talking to us today. I know in my life I love yoga because I feel like it's mind, body, and spirit all in one, like everything gets a workout. But sometimes I feel like how yoga's manifests in our culture now, there's a disproportionate emphasis on the asana practice, and that the meditation, the mantra, the kirtan, the Ayurveda gets kind of lost. Like every time I see, power yoga class at a gym, I'm like, oh my God, really? So I just wanted to hear your insight on that, and if you feel like, 90 years after Yogananda was here, do you feel like we are getting closer to what he imagined for us? Or some of us are, and then mainstream culture is taken in another direction? Or what do you think?
I think yoga is really maturing in this country. I mean, I live in Los Angeles, and I'm seeing a lot of integration of mantra and meditation into Hatha yoga classes. A lot of extra workshops. I mean, you look at their kirtan festivals. The Omega Institute in New York has this giant ecstatic chant weekend, and Bhakti Fest out in the desert in Joshua Tree. I think 3,000 or 4,000 people are gathered to sing and chant the names of God for 4 days straight. That's incredible. So I do think, this is America, and yoga is being branded and copyrighted and, all sorts of things, but that ultimately the message of yoga and meditation and what it can give to people, I think is really getting through. And like I said, maturing and deepening.
I mean, I think that, there are 20 million people practicing yoga in America. That's a huge number of people, and they're not all going to be doing it in a holistic way. But I do think that even practicing Hatha Yoga with good teachers, that something changes within. And it's a journey, and I think everyone gets to be on the journey exactly where they're at. And that is I think it's inevitable that it will develop into something. I think that it does something on, to your nervous system, and then that nervous system quiets down and it helps you to be more contemplative. And then some people take it a step further and they actually want to sit and meditate. Other people, they just might be more aware in their lives. But I think it's all great, wherever they are.
I had a teacher once that said, you do your yoga and your yoga will do you. And that's been my experience.
Hi, thank you for being here. Looking at the stage, the audience, and what I know in general, yoga tends to be a very female skewing activity. Two-part question. One, why do you think that is? And two, are you marketing the movie in such a way that will try to attract more women to see it?
It's a great question. Well, I can only come from my own perspective, so I think that it's part of that tradition. I mean, that's the way it happened when Yogananda came in the 20s, too. It was women who primarily showed up for the lessons. And they would primarily show up, to hear a speaker. And eventually, they would bring their husbands to come as well. And that's how the men got involved. And I think that it's, tapping into the intuitive self is very much of a feminine aspect. I think that we're at a time in the world, I personally believe that, women and the feminine aspect, because men have that too, so it's not just women, but the feminine aspect, it's definitely time for the feminine aspect to be ushered into the world. And yoga is a great way to tap into that. If you're the male minority who is tapping into that, then more power to you, and lucky you to get to be around all those women. So spread the word. Oh, marketing the movie to women? I think we're marketing the movie to everybody.
Yeah. We have not been gender specific.
No.
Yeah.
Should we be? Are you a marketing guy?
If your audience is women, I would recommend skewing your advertising.
Okay, we'll talk later.
But I think there may also be a difference in Right. I think there's a difference in demographic between Hatha yoga classes and meditation practitioners. And I think that the gender is is less skewed in meditation.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. Your insights are great, and I believe that there's not enough times that you can keep repeating the same things about the great things that yoga does. But also what I've seen in my life is that there are loads of people that are against it and don't understand it, especially when it comes to spirituality and things like God and meaning of life, and for them it's really scary. So I wonder how you, not necessarily battle that, but how you deal with that from people around you, and maybe some that don't quite understand what you're trying to achieve with this movie or with yoga practice in general.
Sorry, there's a little noise. So you're saying, how do we battle that resistance? That is such a great question, because to me, it's all about that. When I was saying earlier about surrender, I mean, I think it's a really hard thing to do, and we're sort of trained in a weird way not to be people that surrender in life. We're trained to stick up for ourselves and do this and do that, and the richness that we can receive through surrender is just held from us. So, I mean, for me, Yogananda, doing this movie was just a gift, because I don't know that I would have gotten there without this film. And Yogananda made it easy, because he just says, start anywhere. It's there. God has many aspects. It's form. It's formless. It's peace. It's find that kernel. There was a monk at Self-Realization Fellowship who said to me, have you ever experienced peace? And, I definitely felt like I had experienced peace in my life. I knew that. I could point immediately to several things that were deep peace experiences. And he just said, build on that. Make that your God. And that paved the way. And then, Yogananda's very, very open. I mean, the aspect of the feminine is practiced in India. For me, it was formless, and I just allowed that to be. And I just took the instructions. He spells it all out. There's and so just taking the steps. I think it's diving in, and I think there has to be an adventurer in you, because you got to buck the system. You got to just say, I don't care, I'm gonna try this. And you have to not really be so concerned about what other people are thinking about you for going on that journey and for being an adventurer.
I think Yogananda is a really user-friendly guru. And he systemized his teachings into lessons. He was visionary. He was sending out mail order lessons in the late 1920s. That just blows my mind. It's like sending out an e-blast today. It's incredibly forward-thinking. But also, I just want to say, so the lessons are always there. It's really easy to go through them methodically. But also, if I heard you right, you're also asking how when other people are reacting to you. So like my family and my friends, they're tired of me talking about yoga. But I will say that when I'm really on my game, when I'm really doing a regular practice, and I'm pretty happy, and I'm really non-reactive, and I'm pretty at peace, and they say, what's going on with you? What are you doing? What's different? And then I'm able to say, I'm doing my yoga, and it's doing me.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you both so much for coming and sharing this great discussion with us. And the film comes out on Friday in select theaters nationwide, so go see it. It's amazing.
I just want to say thank you for having us, AOL Build, and that I am an AOL user. It is my primary email address.
We both are. Yeah, this has been a great experience. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you, AOL.